It was the adventure that drew me. It wasn't necessarily the art. I had two sisters that were good girls. They did what they were told. I had to sneak out the window and go to the worst neighborhoods of New York and have some experiences and fun and just sheer adventure.
Graffiti obviously goes back to, the Latin word graffito, to scratch, so it goes back as long as anybody wants to say I'm here. But the modern style writing of graffiti, that is an American art form. It's one of the few ones, and it's made by children, for the most part. It used to be that you retired by the time you were 16.
So modern day graffiti started in New York City in the late 1960s. It was first on the streets in Washington Heights, started by Taki 183. It was originated by kids aged 13, 14, 15-year-olds. They invented graffiti, invented street art by trespassing into the subway trains and tagging up. By the early 80s, it was on all the subway trains. The tourists all thought that the trains came that way and just loved it. I'm Lady Pink. I'm a New York-based artist. Started as a graffiti artist and a vandal in the early 80s, painting on the New York subway trains. But I've grown into professional artist, exhibit artist, and muralist over the past 44 years. What drew me to graffiti as a teenager was more the adventure, being down with the popular crowd, having kicks and giggles with my friends, putting one over the man, being a rebel.
My name is John Briner. I've been into art since I was a kid. I was raised around art. My mom and my grandmother were both artists in their own respect, and I grew up, really interested in comic books. My grandmother actually illustrated comics for a local company here, and so I just grew up with comics, then skateboarding when I got a little bit older, and through that you kind of learn about different subcultures. Skateboarding led into us designing our own, skate decks, our own t-shirts. So it kind of brought us into a do-it-yourself mentality, which is really what graffiti is. So it's kind of paving the way, and then just by chance I was introduced to graffiti through actually a music magazine called The Source Magazine. I think that was probably about May '94.
So, I did that in the early 80s. By 1985, I finished subway trains, and everyone had quit, and I was just doing above ground galleries and exhibits and doing all that, legit stuff that a professional artist does. And then I met my husband in '93. And then we were going out doing freight trains together as we were dating. That's what graffiti writers do on a date, And then we were doing nice legal walls that easily I could get permission for, with a nice portfolio of all this fine art and great stuff that I do. Landlords would just give us their walls, and and lo and behold, we were painting with all our friends, inviting everyone, and everyone's getting down and having fun weekends of painting up the city. It had walls all over Queens and Brooklyn and such. So in the early 90s, it was refreshing to go out and do graffiti again. Vandalism on the freight trains. There was no fences. You could just roll up off the street. We lived like a 15-minute walk from a freight yard. So we'd just go there and paint silly stuff. Nonsense. It was refreshing. It wasn't going to be documented. It wasn't going to be, I don't have to fess up to it. So I was just doing silly nonsense. Garbage. It was great. And it would just roll out across the country. I'd never see it again. So it was nostalgic, like being a kid. But then, when one of my friends got thrown on the ground and a cop put a gun to his head, then reality hit. That this isn't just fun and games. That, shit can get real fast. And I didn't want any part of that. So doing graffiti is actual straight up vandalism. You're touching other people's walls and such. And at first it was a misdemeanor, painting on the subway trains. But now it has become a felony. So you can, if you're not going to get shot for painting a subway train, you get charged with a felony and ruin your whole life. So by the time you became 16, when I was doing graffiti, then you can get to go to grown-up jail or such. Before 16, you go to, juvenile jail. And so, the laws have changed over the years, and so graffiti has had to change and adapt.
It's much more accepted now, like it's never been before. I first noticed it with skateboarding with like the police, like in modern times, like say like the last 10 years, the police were so much more cool than in the 90s and the 80s. And I'm thinking it's because these cops are younger than me. They've grown up with extreme sports. Maybe they skateboard themselves, maybe their friends skateboard it. And so that theory, I think, also transcends a little bit into graffiti and street art, where they're a lot more hip to it. And I also feel like it's not as taboo anymore. I'm not saying like police like it or anything. There was a time where they would be like, oh, this is all gang stuff. But now I think they're like, oh no, this is this certain kid. It's just the knowledge has grown. So it's much more commonplace. I think like average people would be like, oh, Banksy, which is an example, very mainstream name, So that's like a new thing. I think it just keeps getting more and more accepted, more and more visible. And like I said, people will keep being like, how can we sell products with this? If it's the people that have always been doing this, have been putting the work in for years, or getting those jobs, then great. That's what it should be. But a lot of times they don't do that extra homework to find out who that is. And you'll see people that haven't really put in the work kind of getting the big jobs. And so it's hard to make everyone happy with anything. And graffiti is especially tough because, look at what it is. It's like a peeing competition for the most part. All the time I was taking photos of everything I was seeing. So now I feel like my biggest contribution is the books I'm creating, because it was kind of like, let me get my photo albums out of my closets and into people's hands. People are like, I never thought I would see these again. This is my youth, this is my teenage years. That's what I'm into the most right now, is trying to get other people's photos out of the shadows, because I don't even have the best photo collections. Like, I got some good ones, but there's people that are way better than me, and I'm like hoping they're like, oh, like, no, let me show mine. And then it's like, yes, this is what we want, because that's collectively the only way you're gonna be able to document an ephemeral art movement like this. It's like you put your name up and it might be gone by the morning, or it might be there for the next 20 years, but so much of it just did not have like much of a life.
So street art is a little bit different than graffiti. We are kindred spirits in the fact that we're all doing vandalism. We are painting and creating art on other people's things that don't belong to us, on public space, other people's private property. Street artists work in a different medium. Graffiti artists, we became like a guild or a tribe or a clan, that we are, very interwoven. We teach each other, we support each other, we've got friends to go out and paint with all the time, someone to watch our back. Street artists didn't have that, but we all came up roughly around the same time. Keith Haring is an original street artist working with chalk. Basquiat is another one, and John Fechner, Jenny Holzer, Richard Hamilton, Mark Nguyen. All of these cats worked with different mediums, paintbrushes, stencils. Jenny Holzer did posturing, with a big hoodie and a big coat. This big white lady, she went out there and she did posturing, her truisms all over downtown. She had the courage to do that, And then she had the courage to invite me to collaborate with her, which was one of the very rare crossovers from the graffiti writer crews to one of the street artists. We worked together. We did dozens of paintings in collaboration way back in the 80s, and still up to today we collaborate. They work in different mediums, but they can totally get arrested for the same thing that we are doing. But the police really have it out for the graffiti writers, because we wage war against them, and it is our mission to sneak around and do that.
It's a weird thing. Graffiti is very rooted in tradition and style, that a lot of its practitioners have trouble accepting things that aren't. And so street art, a lot of times it's not. It's outside of those boundaries, and they probably look at it like, why do you guys want to do letters all the same way when we can, create all these other images? I think it's just another way to get your feelings out there. People look at it a lot of times like graffiti is like, obviously that's not legal, It's just like the machismo, like, oh, keep it real, like that's not as illegal as what we're doing. Oh, they did that in chalk, we could just wipe it off. So there is that back and forth. The two art forms didn't, if they get along now, they didn't always.
I think more than 40 years ago, we were all, doing graffiti on subway trains, trying to figure out what we were going to be when we grew up. We never imagined that it would still be around today, and we have no idea where it would be going in the future. We would have imagined that graffiti or street art would still be here over 40 years later, almost 50 years. It is still going strong. It has evolved. It has gone worldwide, and street art has become the world's biggest art movement. It's in every corner of the world. It is being used in everything, fashion and film and everything above ground. Everyone is borrowing it, stealing it, copying it, needs to have it on their record cover. It is everywhere. It is a backlash against the way that fine art has become just for the elitists, just for the 1%. It has become a commodity, and it is little understood by the masses. It is just abstract shapes and colors, and it's more about the artist's career and the value of the work than the aesthetics of what it actually looks like. So street artists have taken it out to the masses. It can be done by anyone. You don't need a master's degree. You don't need a bona fide certificate that says, oh, you are an artist. You just need